The Raptors get themselves an all-star, and they also get a much-needed win back in Toronto. Let's talk about it.
This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network covering your team every day. Coming to you live after the Raptors 107-100 win against the Utah Jazz on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On Podcast feed. I'm Zulfi, Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the Raptors and the NBA for over 2 years with outlets like Sportsnet Raptors Public. And now I'm one of your humble hosts on the Raptors Postcast, breaking down each and every game with you. And with me is Duane Notice, a.k.a. Dino, professional basketball player and analyst. Duane is representing Canada. He's been part of the Raptors system with the 905, and he's still hooping professionally in leagues like the CEBL. And on tonight's show, we're going to talk about how the Raptors were able to grit out a win against the Utah Jazz, especially doing their work late. We'll talk about the turning point and surviving without Scottie Barnes on the stretch, which looked dicey for a second. Then we'll get some thoughts from our resident pro in a segment we like to call Take Notice. And we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. And Duane, like I said earlier, a much-needed win for the Raptors. This was game one of a 5-game homestand back in Toronto. They're able to ultimately improve to 30-21, which is pretty impressive considering that matches their win total from a season ago when they finished 30-52. And oh yeah, Scottie Barnes was named an All-Star, so that was pretty good as well. But ultimately, this did, I think, come down to the fourth quarter. What did you see from the Raptors closing this win out?
I saw their attention to detail. I always speak about it, but them just buckling down on the defensive end, I think was a great thing for the Raptors at the end of the day, forcing a lot of turnovers, only holding the Jazz to, I think, 16 fourth quarter points. So, again, doing their job at the end of the day. We've been talking about the Raptors not being able to close quarters or put a whole game together, but today they found a way to do that with different ingredients, and that came from them just being well sound on the defensive end, rotating at a high level. How many times did we see them force guys like Ace Bailey into taking tough contested mid-range jump shots? I think the Raptors were just on one page today, and you saw it. It was evident. And you talk about a guy like Scottie Barnes, shout out to him for being an all-star, well-deserved. But his pursuit of the basketball is just so extraordinary. The way he's able to have a knack for making these defensive reads and plays at a high level, I think is so commendable. We saw him have a whole bunch of blocks. One was very special when RJ did a great job of holding up Laurie, attacking the basket on the right side in the second half. And Scottie came out and beat that thing to the sky. So shout out to Scottie for, again, playing just so resilient today. He had a little injury at the end of the game, but was able to stay in. So, again, Scottie doing his thing and doing it at a high level.
Yeah, I think you've talked about it before where you say trust the process. And I think for the Raptors, that especially mattered tonight in this game. It wasn't the prettiest effort. They were beat on the glass a lot. I think they were like a minus 20 at one point, but they ended up bringing it back. They finished down 48-36 in the paint, right? So the Utah Jazz's size was causing them a lot of problems. Yusuf Nurkic, Lauri Markkanen, even if you look at a guy like Kyle Filipowski, these are all guys that were able to make an impact in this game for a variety of the reasons. Now, some of it was the Raptors maybe not necessarily giving that defensive effort the entire way, and that kind of combined with some of their offensive struggles. But towards the end of this game, you mentioned it. They held them to 16 points in the fourth quarter. They held the Jazz to 36% field goal percentage in the fourth quarter. The Raptors, as we know, are one of the clutchest defenses in the NBA, but you hadn't seen that the last couple of games. They had back-to-back losses where they blew late leads against the Knicks and the Magic, and we kept saying, okay, we know the offense isn't always going to be there. It's going to have its droughts, but your defense is supposed to be your calling card, and we didn't see it against the other two teams. And against the Jazz, this was like, I don't want to say it was a must need or like it needed to show, but it kind of had to, because this isn't a great Jazz team. Like, we know they're young and scrappy, but this is a team that's 5-17 on the road. This is a team that's won 15 games all season. So for the Raptors to find that defensive identity late as well as they did, I think it was just a kind of indicative of, like you say all the time, Duane, it was trusting the process, trusting that this is going to be a strength for them. And it thankfully showed out for them at the end of this game.
Yeah, it definitely did. You spoke about it, but the interior size advantage that opposing teams are having over the Raptors is starting to become a continued storyline and an issue for them. We saw with them giving up the points in the paint and the disruption there. But then I would also say discourage guys like CMB, who, how many times did we talk about it, but him having open looks towards the basket, he was second guessing himself because he's trying to go up against an oversized guy like a Nurkic. But his ability to find these guys and be aware and create open shots for his teammates, I think is something that we have to give credit for. But again, the Raptors is buckling down on defense, I think, is one of the main reasons as to why they won the game. But Z, it's also a matter of their offense showing out today. You talked about it being the Jazz. Yes, it's not the greatest team in the world, but it's still an opportunity to build some confidence on both sides of the basketball. And did that today with shooting the three ball. They didn't shoot it exceptionally well. They didn't shoot the clip at a high level, but at the same time, they still made more shots than we've seen them make previous games. I mean, the last 2 games, I think combined, they shot 27% on wide open three-pointers. As a professional basketball player, again, you're not going to make every shot in the world, but you have to capitalize because it's the pros, man. It's so hard to get a wide open shot in the league. So when they're able to move the ball under that Darko 0.5 offense and get these created open shots, and they're missing, it's such a deflator. And we see how that rolls over and snowballs onto the defensive end. But today, they were able to make shots starting from the first quarter where they went, I think, 50% from the three-point line in the first quarter, and then it carried over through the rest of the game. So again, building confidence against a weaker Jazz team on both ends, offense and defense, is going to be well for the Raptors during this homestand.
Yeah, you mentioned it there. The Raptors started 7 of 14 from beyond the arc, and that was just in the first quarter. Just for context, that's as many threes as the Raptor made all game against the Magic. That's also as many threes as they made all game against the Knicks. They had only made 7 threes in each of those games. They make 7 in the first quarter tonight. Now, ultimately, they only make 5 more threes the rest of the game. But like you said, 12 of 35, 34% isn't going to blow anyone away. But for this Raptors team that's bottom 5 in three-point shooting, it's okay. It's a middle ground. We talked about it after the Lakers game and the Warriors win, right? Like they barely hit any threes against the Lakers. I think they made like 5, and then against the Warriors, you come out and hit like 21 or something crazy like that. You knew neither was going to be ideal or sustainable for you. You needed to find a middle ground, and that's what the Raptors did in this game. And I think a big part of it was guys were, you mentioned all the time, it's being confident and shooting and knowing that you kind of have to take those shots in stride, especially with the type of defenses you're facing. The Jazz, like other teams, were junking it up a bit. They went into a zone from time to time. And then when you have a guy like Mamu who finished 4 of 7 from downtown, who's willing to shoot, whether it's contested or not, guy like Jamal Shed, who isn't necessarily the best three-point shooter, but he's willing to take it from different spots and hit a couple here or there, timely ones especially. Emmanuel quickly had himself a better three-point shooting night, finishing 3 of 6 after a couple rough games. Like, you're not going to end up making a ton every night, but for the Raptors, a middle ground is fine. 12 of 35 is fine, and it allowed you to truthfully stay afloat at times. The Raptors had 2 different droughts in this game where they went, I think, like 5+ minutes without a made field goal. And sometimes you need a three-pointer to go in to kind of like give yourself a bit of breathing room, give yourself this sense of relief that like, okay, we're not doing as bad. And for that to happen tonight, I think to your point, was really big in alleviating some of the struggles.
Yeah, I like you using that phrase middle ground, because I think the Raptors are one of those teams that they may not do one thing extremely well, but when they're able to fill multiple buckets and kind of hit you from a variety of ways, I think that's when the Raptors are very successful. So for them tonight, 25 of 30 from the free throw line. I think when you shoot the ball at the line at a high level, you're attacking the basket. Yes, they lost the points in the paint battle, but you still got to love their aggression towards the paint. Guys like RJ making it happen down low, using his pivot, getting guys up in the air, getting to the free throw line. But then on top of that, when you mix that in with the 19 fast break points, and then you include the three-pointers, I think that is the proper ingredients. And it puts them in a position to at least try to win the game, or at least be involved in the end of these ball games, which is something we haven't really seen as of late because of the mental lapses that they've been showing. And then you talked about it, but the defense from the Jazz was just a muck it up, junk it up style. And I think a lot of teams are trying to use that going forward against the Raptors. We haven't really seen this in the NBA period, but the Jazz doing a three-quarter court type of press in the sense where they were trapping to the point where they're actually, getting some turnovers on quickly. He lost the ball a couple times, or forcing the Raptors into these possessions where they went deep into the shot clock and weren't able to get into their offense because of that style of defense that surprised them. So again, going forward, the Raptors are going to have to understand that they're going to be faced with a plethora of defenses, and they're going to have to figure out ways to attack that and alleviate that, or else it's going to be trouble going forward.
Yeah, I think that Jazz defense was most effective in the second quarter. The Jazz went on a 16-4 run at one point, and 5 turnovers by the Raptors during that run. To your point, it was this like three-quarter press that the Raptors truthfully didn't have much of an answer for, and I felt like they were trying to pass their way around it. And maybe that's the strategy sometimes, but like they really were not comfortable trying to dribble around it, trying to penetrate it with any, like, again, deep dribble moves or anything like that. I remember RJ Barrett on the left side drives and tries to throw a cross-court pass to the right wing, easily read by the defense. Jameson Battle was in the left corner and tried to throw it all the way across the court to the right wing at one point during that stretch. Those are like, again, you're feeling stuck, but the decision makings and the reads, you could just tell they were uncomfortable with it. But it was once they kind of settled into it a little bit and trusted themselves with the ball in their hands and making some of their decisions, you saw the Raptors pick up their pace offensively. You mentioned the 19 fast break points. The Jazz give up the most fast break points in the NBA. So that's something you have to take advantage of. And we've talked about with the Raptors. That is a strength of theirs offensively most nights for a Raptors offense that truthfully is bottom 10 in the league for the most part. So they need to take advantage of those strengths that they have. So once they sped things up and got going a little bit, they were able to attack that press a bit better. And again, all of it ended up paying off in the end, even though it wasn't the most stellar offensive night. You do enough to get a much needed win. Again, after coming off of 2 losses, it wasn't the prettiest, but for the Raptors, it got the job done.
Yeah, it really did. But again, talking about that defense from a player standpoint, what I could only predict is happening is that they don't work on these situations. You're not really working on getting trapped out of a 3-quarter court because that is not a defense that is commonly used in the NBA. So as a player, when I was watching that and I was like, man, these are boneheaded mistakes. I think we even saw a 8-second shot clock violation, right, or bring it up before half court violation, which is something you rarely see. Boneheaded plays. Again, as a player, I'm like, man, they teach that when we're in middle school, when we're in elementary school. But again, because the Raptors aren't working on that, or pros in general aren't working on that, you assume they're able to out dribble these presses. But because when it comes at a surprise and that element and factor you're not prepared for it, I think it really caught the Raptors by surprise, and they were able to struggle, and the Jazz were able to jump on the Raptors because of it. But like you said, when they're able to fight that pressure with making better decisions, I think it was more favorable for the Raptors. I mean, the Raptors, when they play fast, I think it's to their advantage in the simple fact because now they're not thinking and overthinking about the plays they got to make. Now they're playing with the trust that we spoke about, the confidence, and just not second-guessing themselves. We see guys like Mamu who shot the ball high at a good level, and it's because, like you said, he's not hesitant, he's not reluctant. And I find that when the Raptors are second-guessing themselves, that's when they have all these problems. So for them, they just got to be decisive, and you saw that be an infectious attitude today.
Yeah, I think, like you said, when they don't overthink it and they're in situations where they rely on their instincts, I think guys like RJ Barrett and guys like Emmanuel Quickly especially benefit the most from that. These are guys who, they have the talent to make good reads, but it's when they're like, when they get pressured and they feel like they have to make multiple decisions at once, sometimes it doesn't go their way. You mentioned already RJ Barrett getting deep into the paint and making better reads the second or third time versus the first time when he didn't really stop himself. Emmanuel Quickly, we've talked about a lot, where like when he's not killing his dribble, he's able to find better opportunities, get deeper in the paint, and make more decisions. You saw that kind of bear fruit tonight in a game like this. So for the Raptors, you said it, rely on your instincts, rely on your strengths, and whether it's a good or bad Jazz team, that's a way to victory, and they were able to get it done tonight. And I guess the last thing I want to ask before we get into our turning point, then, Duane, is like, how satisfied are you after a win like this? Because again, it wasn't pretty. The Jazz, they won inside the paint, they won on the glass, they took advantage of things multiple times. The Raptors defense, I think in the first half especially, wasn't all that great. Utah, I think in the first half was like 13 of 20 in the paint. They're shooting 65% in the paint, getting basically line drives inside. But the Raptors did turn around the second half, get this win to start this homestand. So how satisfied as a player would you be coming out of this game with a win?
As a player, I'd be super satisfied, Z, only for the simple fact that, yes, it may not have been a statistical win and dominance in the sense of that category, but from the sense of a moral standpoint, I think it was a major, important win. It was pivotal for the Raptors, who are struggling. As this team is learning how to continue to evolve together, they're learning how to win these tough, grinded out, nitty-gritty games. And again, the Raptors figured out a way to win. Wins don't have to come pretty. They don't have to be your prom date at the dance. They just got to be something that is achievable. And when you work hard, you're able to achieve that. So for the Raptors, figuring out the different nuances of how they could win, whether it's without Scottie, who got hurt at the end of the game, or whether it's with a guy like Brandon Ingram, who was struggling throughout that second quarter, like just figuring out who they can lean on, different scenarios, how different players can step up. We speak about it all the time, but the next up mentality, I think it's something that they have to take into account going forward. As they won this game, you leave feeling high spirits, you leave feeling good about yourself, and you leave just trying to fulfill those buckets of the philosophies that you're preaching going forward so that you can try and approach this all-star game on a good note with closing out these victories or these games with some victories.
Yeah, speaking of all-star, there was a bit of a stretch down towards the end of this game here where the Raptors didn't have their all-stars, but they somehow survived, and we're going to talk about that with our turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
All right, Duane, I'm going to set the table here for everyone. There's about 4.5 minutes left in this game. The Raptors at this point had gone 5 minutes without a field goal, and they were somehow clinging on to a 6-point lead when it appeared disaster had struck because Scottie Barnes grabs a rebound, tries to run the break, gets tangled up with Jusuf Nurkic. He falls down and appears to tweak his left ankle when their feet get tangled up. Scottie tried to stay in the game, eventually had to limp off the court because he couldn't stay in. Now, thankfully, he did come back into the game later on, but there was a couple possessions there where the Raptors, if I was them, I would have been a bit worried because, again, Scottie was trying to orchestrate a lot of what they were doing inside, but it was the Raptors' other would-be all-star, in my opinion, because unfortunately Brandon Ingram wasn't named an all-star reserve with Scottie Barnes. Now he has a chance to make it if there's an injury replacement with a guy like Giannis, but Brandon Ingram stepped up with Scottie Barnes out for those couple minutes. First thing he did was get a much-needed basket. Again, I mentioned 5 minutes without a field goal. What does he do? He muscles his way into the paint, goes up and under over the Utah Jazz bigs, and finishes right at the basket. But we know Brandon Ingram's a good scorer. It's what he offers defensively and how engaged he's been in this Raptors defensive system that's been so impressive. The other way down the floor, he stonewalls Jusuf Nurkic right at the basket, takes a shoulder to the chest, forces a contested look, and it's a miss, gets the rebound, pushes it ahead. Shed finds Mamu for a transition finish, and all of a sudden the Raptors hold on to a 7-point lead when Scottie Barnes checks back in. They were able to maintain themselves without their leader and without their all-star who had been doing everything for them on the floor tonight, vocally and on the court. And I think that big part of it was because Brandon Ingram. And oh yeah, later, just a couple minutes later, as the game's ending, what does he do? He ices it. Brandon Ingram gets to that right baseline, his patented spot, fadeaway, pull-up jumper, cash. Raptors end up leading 104-97 at that point, and they're able to keep on for this victory. So Brandon Ingram's play down the stretch and surviving without Scottie Barnes, I thought was a turning point in a very close game to that point, and what could have gotten away from the Raptors very quickly without their all-star out there.
Well, I'm a big Batman fan, and it reminds me of Batman Beyond. Bruce Wayne is retired, a.k.a. Scottie has to go to the bench, so who's going to step up? We have someone else carrying the mantle, and now we have a new vigilante out there. Again, B.I. didn't have the best first half, but man, was he locked in the second half. And he played with a different sense of energy, a sense of pride. Maybe he felt the chip on his shoulder of not being named the All-Star reserve this year. We don't know. Hopefully he'll get that because, like you said, of the injury of Giannis. But we know he's deserving of it, and we saw that on display in the last bit of the fourth quarter. You mentioned all the great plays that he had, but for me, it was the fact that it was a two-way situation. We're so used to Scottie playing on both sides of the ball, but Brandon Ingram having his fingerprints on both sides of the ball. You mentioned that great play against Nurkic where he was able to hold his ground, that right block, and then stay vertical. Again, a guy who doesn't look like he has all the strength in the world, but man, he's able to be resilient down there, whether it's on offense and he's posting up or whether it's on the defensive end, and made a crucial stop. But then, like you said, having that spry bounce in his step, we saw him just displaying the tools, man. It seems like he has an infinity bag when it comes to offense. We got to his spots. He could shoot over defenders. And the thing I loved about it is that he didn't settle. He got to the line. He got a couple nice baskets. How about that great play in transition where he stole the ball, intercepted the pass, came down, did a step through, a misdirection step through, over the top high pickup to the layup. He tapped the glass and told him, here, take those 2 deuces points with you. But I love the way Brandon played, especially at the end, pivot work, nice left-handed finger roll. Man, he was locked in, and you need a guy like that to step up, especially when one of your other key components go down. And I think when he does that, he just inspires the rest of the team because his poise and his calm sense of nature is just so chilling to the defense, but also to the offense and his teammates, because it just senses it provides that sense of calm, right? That nature of like, we'll be all right. We have a guy like BI who we can give the ball to, don't have to call any type of play for, and he'll ensure that we get the best possible play. And that was a nice little, like you said, patented step back, bounce out from the right side, and he iced the game. And we like a guy like BI to continue to play with a chip on his shoulder. I think the last couple of games, he's really been on fire when it comes to his offense. Again, looking at him to still be aggressive. And I just love the fact that he's doing it on both ends, right? Like, we're so used to players who love to play basketball at a high level on the offensive end, but when he's tuned in and deflecting passes and he's talking and he's vocal and he's contesting shots and being vertical and staying out of foul trouble, I think he's such an important factor to the Raptors going forward.
Yeah, you bring in a guy like Brandon Ingram to be the 1B to Scottie's 1A, and when then 1A gets hurt and out, everyone naturally looks at that 1B and be like, hey, we kind of need you to figure it out or to save us here. Now, the Raptors have done that at different times throughout the season, but especially tonight for those couple of minutes without Scottie, they needed it, and Brandon Ingram delivered in droves, and that's exactly why you bring a guy like that in. That's why you sign him to that extension, and that's why he probably should be an all-star. So hopefully Brandon Ingram can get into the all-star game. but we'll have to wait and see in that part. But coming up, Duane and I are going to dive into the Take Notice segment and how the Raptors were able to get back to their strength on the fast break. And then we're also going to hand out our player of the game as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast. Now, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And this week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs one passing yard for the max discount to win. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you cash in. Prize Picks is super simple to use. It takes no time to get started, and the format is clean. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. And the social feeds feature is also awesome. You can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with just one click. It makes watching games even more fun because every drive and every stat matters. And I know I'm biased here as a Falcons fan, but I'm saying go Seahawks. I do not want another Patriots Super Bowl. Sorry, not sorry. So download the Prize Picks app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. This episode is also brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being in the NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets though, that part hasn't always been so simple, and that's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. And speaking of fans, they showed out tonight for Scottie Barnes being named an all-star. That celebration and presentation they had for him during the game was awesome, and the fans in Scotiabank Arena were letting him hear the cheers, which he so rightfully deserved. And you can be there for that. Browsing the app is straightforward and intuitive with Gametime. You just pull it up, pick an upcoming game, and you have tickets locked in within minutes. You can see your view from your seat before buying, which makes choosing tickets easy. And you see the all-in price up front, so there's no surprise fees. Now, like I said, the Raptors are in the midst of a 5-game homestand here at Scotiabank Arena. So it's a good time to check out the app and see what deals you can find because everything is quick, intuitive, and stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. And lastly, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, and so much talk about relationships. And it can honestly feel like everyone has their love life all together, and you may not. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring out. I can tell you, as somebody who recently got married, it's not always that simple in your romantic journey. You're always figuring it out. And therapy can be one of those ways to help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off of yourself. So I know it's easy to assume everyone else has a perfect relationship, but most people are always working through something. And therapy can help you recognize patterns that may be weighing relationships down or even help in feeling more confident outside of relationships. So whether that's communicating better, setting healthier boundaries, or no longer wanting to carry things alone, BetterHelp is there. BetterHelp provides licensed therapists in the U.S. and they do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time. So sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BETTERHELP.com/lockedonnba. As we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors in the morning. He'll have more in-depth analysis after the weekend on the Raptors victory that snapped a 2-game losing streak. All right, now it is time for our Take Notice segment where our resident pro, Duane Notice, gives us some of his observations from this game.
Yes, sir. Today's Take Notice segment for tonight's game was the stops and goals. But first of all, I know they were playing in the 6 at Scotiabank Arena, but it felt like Sesame Street out there. I mean, the Raptors were moving like the Cookie Monsters with 10 steals, being super disruptive and active on the defensive end. They forced 22 Jazz turnovers. I think that was a catalyst for them getting out. One of the things that I noticed recently and as of late is when the Raptors are able to get and hover around that 20-point or more mark for fast break points, they put themselves in the best position to win basketball games. So for them, 19 fast break points, and it was all fueled from them getting out in transitions, but you can't get out in transition without getting stops. And they were rotating. You saw the low man doing a great job. You saw them fronting Nurkic in certain situations, just their attention to detail, making other guys try to be the guy. Yes, Lauri Markkanen had his game where he put up points, but it wasn't the most efficient. So he had to work for his buckets. He saw multiple defenders, and the Raptors just did a great job of turning their stops into buckets. And that's what you want to do when, again, you know you're not the strongest three-point shooting team out there. You know that sometimes in the half court, especially the way the Jazz were playing defense, right? They were really heavy on the nail, blocks and elbows, we like to call it. There was 4 defenders there at all times, just looking at the ball handler, making it hard for the Raptors to get any easy buckets. So for them, you want to mitigate that by getting out in transition, because when it comes to the half court, sometimes it can get a little stagnant. They want to rely on BI, but when they're able to move the ball with precision, it's no accident the Raptors are so successful when they run the lanes, because they have guys like RJ making great decisions, guys like Scottie who are able to run and make great decisions, and then guys like Mamu, etc., that are able to hit the shots at a high level and fill those running lanes, which is so important for the Raptors because they have so many threats and weapons whenever they do get the ball and are able to turn it down on the other team. So again, shout out to the Raptors for converting stops into buckets. That stop and go mentality is such a great rhythm, and if they're able to capitalize on that every single night, then you best believe that Raptors are going to be in it at the end of ball games.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up as the take notice segment, because I felt like it was an intentional adjustment for the Raptors coming out of halftime. They get outscored by 10 in the second quarter. They look sluggish on both ends of the floor, quite honestly. I think at halftime they were shooting something like 36% from the field. But to get their easy offense, they were just much more intentional about speeding things up. I think the first couple possessions coming out of halftime, RJ Barrett is able to quickly get inside for some free throws. The very next play, post-entry pass to CMB, who, like you said, had been giving up some opportunities in the dunker spot, wasn't really as aggressive as he could have been. Doesn't hesitate, spins left, goes right up, gets a layup. IQ, not long after, gets a quick trigger 3. Raptors 6-0 run. They start the third quarter strong. You even go forward a couple possessions where the Raptors go on an 8-0 run. You had back-to-back buckets by Brandon Ingram where he wasn't facing a set defense. You mentioned he gets that steal, goes coast to coast with that step over move, which was so sweet, so slick for a guy his size, going through the Jazz defense like a knife through butter, basically. But then you go the next possession down, he comes down, gets Lauri Markkanen on the island, does not wait, does not dribble a bunch, lulls him to sleep real quick with a one move at the nail, takes a mid-range jumper, which is his sweet spot, cashes it. Again, Raptors 8-0 run. They're able to get quick, efficient offense, and that's exactly what this Raptors team need. That's their bread and butter, like you said, and it very much made the difference for them in the second half when they sped things up.
Yeah, speeding things up is definitely their call for just going forward. I think that's something they can rely on because, man, it's so hard to control making shots, but what you can control is your effort on the defensive end. And when you're able to translate that into easy offense, then you know what? It's going to be simpler for you to win basketball games. So shout out to the Raptors for doing that, playing with high hands at high level. One of the things I love about the Toronto Raptors, too, is their X-out scheme on defense. So many times they're able to press the ball and have the ball handlers up top, having the trust in the factor, knowing that if they get beat off the dribble, they could peel switch, and that ball handler defender who gets beat is able to go to the strong side corner and have that strong side defender slide over for help. We see that happen so many times, and it's a vacuum in the way they're able to close down these driving lanes from opposing teams. But the Raptors are so locked in on the defensive end when you have guys like Scottie on the back line, like I continue to talk about, who are willing to put their bodies on the line, whether take a charge or just take a hard foul or contest a shot at a high level. So again, the Raptors, bread and butter outside of transition, should be turning defense into offense because they're definitely clutch when it comes to shutting down opponents at the end of basketball games.
I think that's very well said, Duane. All right, now it is time to hand out our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, this is one of those ones where it felt like a do-it-by-committee game, so it's going to be a little tough to pick one player here. 4 out of the 5 starters finished in double figures. Like I mentioned, Brandon Ingram, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal and a block, which I feel like we're saying that every game now. He at least gets 1 steal and a block. So like you said, defensive end, he's doing his work. Scottie Barnes finishes a +5 with 14 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 4 blocks. We keep saying that for Scottie, too. A lot of work. But then RJ Barrett, he has a 21-point game. Emmanuel quickly puts up 17, 5, and 4. And then Mamu, 20 points off the bench. He ends up 6 of 9 from the field, hits 4 threes, which is a team high. So a lot of different performances here that I'm sure we could highlight. So I'll leave it to the resident pro, Duane. Where do you go if you're thinking player of the game?
Oh, man, this is a tough one, but I really have to say Mamu's presence was a difference maker in this game. Welcome back to the party, Mamu, who was playing at such a high level when he was on the road. But tonight he found his rhythm, just being confident, stepping into shots. Even in the second half, to cap off a run. I think in the fourth quarter, he had a beautiful play where he didn't force trying to finish over Nurkic, but he pump faked and finished on the reverse side using the basket as a protection mechanism for that reverse layup. I think that was so intelligent by him, well done by him. But his ability to be unselfish but take and make the right plays, I think is such an empowering thing for the Raptors. It's very rare you have a guy in his position who's able to do that and also make an impact at the line. He's not afraid to attack the basket. We always find ourselves talking about how the opposing team has size in the interior, and maybe Mamu is a guy who's undersized at that big position, but he really, really fights hard and he makes his strength and presence be felt and known. So again, I don't think if Mamu didn't play this game at the level that he played it at, the Raptors would be in the position to win, especially with all the things you mentioned, the different variables of Scottie going down, of BI not having the best first half, of the Raptors kind of struggling in that second quarter. But I think Mamu just being steady. And again, shout out to RJ, because I think, he deserves some love as well, because he's just been consistently getting better since his return from his injury. But again, Mamu just finding his consistency, finding his confidence, I think has been great, because it's another asset for the Raptors when you have a guy like Quickly who can get back to playing how he usually plays. When you have a guy like Scottie, obviously in the luxury of BI, but man, what addition to have to your team when you have a guy like Mamu at that position making three-pointers. And we know that's a factor the Raptors need to continue to work at, but also the way he's able to rebound, he's able to move the basketball, and he's able to run the floor. So he's definitely been one of the targets or finishers when it comes to these transition buckets for the Raptors. So, man, Mamu deserves all the love for today's game and all the praises, because he really played at a high level and got back to doing what Mamu does.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I think Mamu deserves a bit of a bit of love here as a bounce back game for him. Like you said, not the best last couple of games, and everything he did tonight was incredibly vital for the Raptors. Like you mentioned, he had 18 points heading into the fourth quarter, I believe, which led the Raptors at that point. Again, when the offense wasn't looking all that great, his spacing and his outside shooting was very important in this game for them, not just offensively, but a guy like Nurkic at first was very much allowed to camp in the paint for times in this game. Either the Jazz were basically like pre-switching actions to keep Nurkic camped out there. But when you have a guy like Mamu who starts hitting those threes and is basically no wasted motion, just going out there, spotting up and making these shots, the Jazz have to adjust defensively, and that opens up lanes for other guys to get downhill like the Raptors like to do, even opens up spaces for Mamu to attack closeouts and get to the free throw line. He was 4 for 4 from the line as well. So for him to do that on both ends, I think was important for them tonight. And like you said, what an addition for the Raptors, because what the hell would the Raptor center rotation be right now if he wasn't there and Jakob Poeltl was facing this injury? I think I saw somebody tweet out that Mamu is already like near tops of win shares for Raptors free agent signings since like basically Bismack Biyombo. So we already knew it was a home run free agent addition adding Mamu, but it just looked that much better tonight. And again, if he wasn't there and you're going through these injuries with Jakob Poeltl, who knows what the Raptor center rotation would be like with a young CMB basically having to do even more than he is now. So shout out to Mamu for stepping up tonight and being a big part of this victory for the Raptors. But before we wrap it up, Duane, like I always like to do, any closing thoughts from you? Again, Raptors get the job done. They're now 30-21 on the season, matching their total from a year ago. So obviously in a very different spot. And now they have a couple more home games waiting for them.
Yeah, I think for the Raptors, just use the fact that Scottie's going to be an all-star, potentially BI, as a motivating factor, as it be halfway kind of cement or reassurance the Raptors, moving in the right direction and doing the right things going forward. Use it as motivation. Don't be complacent. But again, there's beauty in the struggle. I think this victory was well needed. It doesn't matter how it happens, just matters that it happens. And for them, watching film, understanding that there's different ways to win basketball games and that they have to be more detailed and intricate on how they handle certain possessions on both ends of the ball, I think it's something they have to be more conscious of going forward. But again, it wasn't the best, most beautiful win, but it was a grind out victory. And the Raptors find themselves being in a lot of these games. So going forward, just take whatever they use to close this game out and use it to their advantage for the next couple games.
I think that's very well said. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be a Picasso like we said before, but it's a win nonetheless. All right, that'll do it for us tonight. For myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Duane Notice. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live and for those listening after. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to the Locked On Raptors on all platforms. And don't forget to comment down below if you have any thoughts on the Raptors' 107-100 win over the Jazz. But we will be back on Wednesday live after the Raptors host Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, the second of 5 straight home games. And we will see you then, breaking it all down on the Raptors Postcast. Peace.